Have you ever wondered what lay just beyond the golden sands of ancient Egypt? Beyond the land of the pharaohs, beyond the pyramids, into a mysterious kingdom where black pharaohs once ruled? That land was Nubia, the cradle of Kush, a civilization as old, powerful, and magnificent as Egypt itself, yet often forgotten by history. Stretching along the Nile River, in what is today southern Egypt and northern Sudan, Nubia was not a mere neighbor. It was a land of gold, warriors, and kings. Its mountains sparkled with minerals, and its people, the Nubians, were strong traders and fearless archers, admired and feared by the Egyptians themselves. Long before Egypt's mighty pyramids pierced the sky, the people of Nubia were already shaping their own destiny, forging weapons, trading ivory and incense, and building the foundations of a culture that would one day challenge the world's greatest empire. Around 2000 BCE, as Egypt rose and fell through its dynasties, a powerful kingdom began to emerge in Nubia, the kingdom of Kush. Its first great capital was Kerma, a thriving city of mud-brick temples and bustling markets. Archaeologists still find evidence of luxury: gold jewelry, fine pottery, and weapons fit for kings. Kerma wasn't a small village, it was an empire's heart, rich and proud. The Egyptians called Nubia the land of gold, and they coveted it deeply. So, during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, the pharaohs sent armies south to conquer. They built forts and temples, trying to control the Nubians. But the spirit of Kush was not easily broken. When Egypt weakened, Kush rose again. The Nubians regained control of their lands, and from the ruins of Kerma, a new capital was born, Napata. Here, the kings of Kush began to see themselves not just as rulers of Nubia, but as heirs to the pharaohs themselves. Now here's the part of the story most people don't know: the time when the tables turned and Nubia ruled Egypt. In the 8th century BCE, a powerful Kushite king named Piye looked north and saw Egypt torn apart by chaos and rival dynasties. Seizing his chance, Piye marched into Egypt with his army of Nubian warriors, disciplined, proud, and unstoppable. He didn't destroy Egypt. Instead, he united it under Nubian rule. Piye believed he was restoring the true spirit of the pharaohs, bringing purity and strength back to the two lands. And thus began the 25th dynasty of Egypt, ruled by the kings of Kush, the so-called Black Pharaohs. Their temples were magnificent, their art divine, and their devotion to the gods unmatched. Kings like Shabaka and Taharka became legends. Taharka, in particular, expanded Egypt's power as far as the Levant. Under his rule, even the Assyrians feared Egypt once more. But as all great powers rise, they must eventually fall. Assyria invaded from the north, and after years of war, the Kushites withdrew, returning to their homeland in Nubia. But they didn't fade into obscurity. Far from it, they built anew. As Egypt weakened, the Kushite kings moved their capital further south to Meroe, near the modern-day city of Shendi in Sudan. Here, beside the Nile and surrounded by desert, they built one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world. Meroe became known as the City of 1,000 Pyramids. Tall, slender pyramids with steep angles dotted the landscape, tombs for kings and queens who ruled for centuries. The people of Kush developed their own writing system, the Meroitic script, one of Africa's earliest native alphabets. And perhaps most fascinating of all, Kush was one of the few civilizations where queens ruled as equals to kings. They were called Kandakes, or Candaces, and they were warriors, diplomats, and leaders. One legendary queen, Amanirenas, fought against the Roman Empire itself when the Romans tried to expand southward. She not only defended Kush, she forced Rome to negotiate peace, earning respect even from the mighty Augustus Caesar. Under the Candaces, Meroe flourished, a center of iron production, trade, and art. Its blacksmiths were renowned, melting and shaping iron with incredible skill. The sounds of hammers echoed across the desert, marking the heartbeat of Africa's oldest kingdom of steel. But no civilization lasts forever. Even the greatest empires, forged by courage and brilliance, eventually bend beneath the weight of time. And so it was with the kingdom of Kush. By the 4th century CE, the golden age of Meroe began to dim. For centuries, it had stood as a beacon of African power, its pyramids glittering under the desert sun, its iron furnaces burning with life. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the flames began to fade. The mighty Nile, once the artery of prosperity, shifted its course. The rich lands that had sustained Meroe's people began to dry. Trade routes that had long brought ivory, incense, and gold from the heart of Africa were now controlled by new powers. To the east, across the Red Sea, rose the kingdom of Axum, a force ambitious and determined, blessed by new connections with the Mediterranean world. The Axumites dominated the trade in ivory and precious metals, drawing merchants and wealth away from Meroe. Step by step, the Kushite capital was left behind, its streets quieter, its furnaces cooling, its temples slowly crumbling beneath the weight of sand. And then, one day, the hammers stopped. The iron furnaces went cold. The voices of Kush, the black pharaohs, the Candaces, the priests, and the poets, faded from the banks of the Nile. But even in silence, their story lived on. The winds of the desert carried whispers of their greatness. The pyramids of Meroe still stood, their sharp peaks piercing the horizon like eternal sentinels, guarding the memory of an ancient people. Smaller than Egypt's pyramids, yes, but perhaps more hauntingly beautiful, built not for show, but for reverence, for remembrance. Each pyramid marked the resting place of a king or queen who once ruled one of Africa's mightiest realms. Their walls, though weathered, still speak in silence, of gold, of courage, of faith in eternity. They stand as monuments to a truth too often forgotten. Africa's history is not a story of darkness waiting for light. It is a story of light that shone long before others saw it. The people of Kush were not imitators of Egypt. They were creators of their own destiny. Their gods, their art, their language, their queens, all uniquely theirs. And while empires like Rome and Axum came and went, the spirit of Kush endured, echoing through generations. Even the Romans, in their age of dominance, could not erase the memory of Kush. When they invaded southern Egypt, they encountered the fierce queen Amanirenas, the Kandake of Kush, a ruler of both beauty and unbreakable will. She faced Rome's armies, and though her forces were outmatched, she refused to surrender. Her defiance forced the mighty Augustus himself to negotiate peace, a rare victory of diplomacy and dignity against an empire that thought itself invincible. That was the legacy of Kush, not endless conquest, but endless resilience, a civilization that stood tall, fought for its sovereignty, and left behind monuments that still defy time itself. Today, if you travel through the vast deserts of Sudan, you'll see those same pyramids, hundreds of them, rising quietly from golden dunes. The sun burns bright above them, and the wind hums softly around their stones. There are no crowds, no tourists, no guards, only the timeless silence of history and the whisper of forgotten greatness. Archaeologists still uncover secrets buried beneath that sand, jewelry of astonishing craftsmanship, weapons of iron, inscriptions written in the mysterious Meroitic script, a language yet to be fully understood. It's as if the kingdom left behind one final mystery, waiting for us to listen closely enough to decode its message. The legacy of Nubia and Kush doesn't just belong to the past. It flows through time, shaping the cultures of Sudan, influencing ancient Egypt, and inspiring the stories of Black royalty and queens who stood equal to any pharaoh or emperor. In their story lies the deeper truth of human civilization. That greatness is not bound by geography, color, or fame. It is born wherever people dream, create, and dare to build something that lasts beyond themselves. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember this: the people of Nubia and Kush were not shadows in Egypt's light. They were their own sun, brilliant, enduring, and proud. They were builders who carved kingdoms from the desert, warriors who defended their homes against empires, dreamers who looked to the stars and believed in eternity. Their pyramids still whisper through the winds of the Sahara, whispering that history is never one-sided, never written by only one hand. It is a tapestry woven by countless civilizations, each thread glowing with its own color and story. And among those threads, the kingdom of Kush shines golden, eternal, unbroken, and forever alive in the sands of time. The people of Nubia and Kush were not shadows cast beneath Egypt's golden light. They were their own sun, radiant, enduring, and proud. Long before the sands of time swallowed their cities, they built worlds of their own. They were builders, shaping kingdoms from the heart of the desert. They were warriors, standing tall against the march of empires. They were dreamers, gazing into the endless stars and believing, truly believing, that their story would never fade. Their pyramids, sharp and slender, still rise from the sands of Meroe, standing as silent guardians of a forgotten glory. The wind passes through them softly, carrying whispers across the desert, whispers that speak of courage, of queens and kings who refused to kneel, of a civilization that dared to define itself. And if you stand among those pyramids at sunset, you can almost hear it. The faint echo of drums, the hum of life that once filled the Nile Valley, the distant laughter of children who ran along riverbanks that are now dry, the chant of priests calling upon Amun and Isis beneath skies painted in gold and crimson. The sands have covered much, but they could never bury the spirit of Nubia, for these were not people who lived in someone else's shadow. They carved their names into stone, into time itself, their language, their art, their gods, each born of their land, their river, their soul. Even when Egypt's monuments gleamed in the north, the people of Kush looked to them not as masters, but as mirrors, reflections of what they too could achieve, reflections of their own divinity. They built temples that touched the heavens and pyramids that honored eternity. They crafted jewelry of gold and carnelian, statues of kings and queens adorned with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, symbols of power that once crossed borders and united lands. They built a civilization that glowed with pride and purpose. Their queens, the Kandaks, ruled with wisdom and courage. Their soldiers fought with hearts of fire, their archers so precise that Egyptian pharaohs once hired them as royal guards. Their traders sailed the Nile and crossed the Red Sea, bringing ivory, ebony, and incense from the heart of Africa to the world beyond. The story of Kush was never just about kings. It was about a people, strong, creative, and connected to the rhythm of the Nile. A people who understood that power was fleeting, but legacy was eternal. And that legacy lingers still. It lingers in the ruins of temples at Napata, in the sun-scorched bricks of Meroe, and in the faces of the Nubian people today, the descendants of a civilization that shaped continents and defied empires. The pyramids of Meroe whisper through the winds of the Sahara, whispering that history is never one-sided, never written by one hand. Every empire, every dynasty, every kingdom, all are but threads woven together in the vast tapestry of humanity. And in that tapestry, the golden thread of Nubia and Kush glows brightly, untouched by time. They remind us that greatness doesn't only come from fame, but from resilience, from the courage to build when the world overlooks you, from the power to endure when others fade away. The kingdom of Kush did not simply vanish, it transformed. Its spirit moved through time, influencing Egypt, inspiring Africa, and leaving behind a legacy of strength that would echo in art, in myth, and in the dreams of those who look south along the Nile and wonder, who were these forgotten kings and queens? Even the silence of their ruins speaks louder than words. As the desert wind howls and the stars shimmer above, those pyramids stand, sharp and defiant against the horizon. They do not crumble in defeat. They endure in remembrance. They are more than tombs. They are testimonies, carved in stone, written in sand, preserved in eternity. And perhaps that is the truest measure of a civilization's greatness. Not how it rose, but how it endures, quietly, gracefully, unbroken. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine standing at the edge of the desert. The air is still. The moonlight paints the dunes in silver. In the distance, the pyramids of Meroe gleam faintly, their shapes half lost to shadow, but still unmistakably proud. You close your eyes, and for a moment, time dissolves. You can feel the pulse of drums from thousands of years ago, the rhythm of life that once flowed through this ancient kingdom. You can hear the whisper of the wind, ancient, sacred, telling you a story older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than memory itself. It is the voice of Nubia, the song of Kush, a melody that rises and falls like the Nile itself, eternal, unbroken, alive. So remember this: the people of Nubia and Kush were never merely the footnotes of history. They were the authors of their own epic. Their story is not about darkness before the dawn. It is the dawn itself, golden, brilliant, and endlessly radiant. Their pyramids still stand. The people of Nubia and Kush were not shadows cast beneath Egypt's golden light. They were their own sun, brilliant, enduring, and proud. They were builders who carved kingdoms from the desert's harsh embrace, turning sand into stone and stone into monuments that defied time. They were warriors who stood against the march of empires and fought not merely for power, but for the right to exist, fiercely, proudly, and freely. They were dreamers who gazed at the endless stars over the Nile and believed that their names would live forever among the gods. To the north, Egypt rose in grandeur. To the south, Kush answered, not as a reflection, but as a power of its own. And though Egypt's fame would echo louder through history, the light of Nubia was never dimmed. It burned steadily, like a star that refuses to fade. Across the shifting sands, their pyramids still stand. Slender and steep, they pierce the horizon of Meroe, smaller than those of Giza, but no less magnificent. Each one holds the story of a ruler who once walked the desert winds, commanding armies, shaping kingdoms, and honoring gods both ancient and divine. If you walk among those pyramids today, you will feel something beyond silence, a presence, the echo of footsteps long gone, the faint hum of songs once sung for kings and queens who ruled not with arrogance, but with reverence, for their people, for the Nile, for the land that gave them life. The pyramids of Meroe whisper through the winds of the Sahara, and what they whisper is not sorrow, but remembrance. They tell us that history is not a single story, not a tale written by one voice or one empire. It is a vast tapestry, woven from countless civilizations, each thread a color of its own, glowing softly in the great fabric of time. And among these threads, the kingdom of Kush shines golden, eternal, unbroken, and forever alive in the sands of time. The people of Kush were not imitators, they were innovators. They created art that spoke of identity, built temples that merged heaven and earth, and forged iron in furnaces that glowed like the hearts of stars. Their blacksmiths were unmatched, their traders fearless, their priests deeply wise. Their queens, the Kandakis, ruled with a strength that shook even foreign powers. Women like Amanirinas stood eye to eye with emperors and did not bow. When Rome itself pushed southward, it met not submission, but defiance. Under her command, the armies of Kush fought the legions of Augustus to a standstill. And when the dust settled, it was the Romans, not the Kushites, who sought peace. That is the spirit of Nubia. That is the heart of Kush. A people who would rather stand and fight than live on their knees. Their history reminds us that greatness is not measured by how long an empire lasts, but by how long its memory endures. And though centuries have passed, their memory endures still. In the pyramids that rise against the sun, in the ruins that sleep beneath the desert sands, and in the descendants who still walk those lands today. In the twilight of the ancient world, when the kingdoms of Kush began to fade, the world around them changed. Trade routes shifted, rivers moved, empires fell and rose again. Yet even as the desert reclaimed their cities, their story refused to die. The stones of Meroe remain, cracked, sunburnt, yet unbroken. The hieroglyphs carved upon them still speak of gods and kings, of hope and eternity. And in that silence, the spirit of Kush lives on, carried by the desert wind, whispering through the ages. So tonight, as you fall asleep to their story, remember this. The people of Nubia and Kush were not merely a footnote beneath Egypt's shadow. They were a chapter of their own, bright, powerful, and proud. Their pyramids still rise against the dusk, catching the last rays of the sun as if holding onto the light of yesterday. Their legacy is not lost. It is alive in every grain of sand, in every gust of wind that sweeps across the Nile's ancient banks. Because history, like the desert, never forgets. And though time may bury cities and silence voices, it cannot erase what was once brilliant. The kingdom of Kush, that golden empire born from the heart of Africa, still shines. Its spirit glows in the stories we tell, in the ruins that stand, and in the dreams of those who remember. They were never shadows. They were sunlight, warm, eternal, and pure. And as the stars rise once more over the sleeping sands of Nubia, their light still burns, a quiet, everlasting fire in the endless night of history. But the story does not end in silence. Even when the walls of Meroe crumbled and its pyramids fell to dust, the legacy of Kush flowed onward, like the Nile itself, winding endlessly through time. Generations passed, and the names of kings and queens faded from the tongues of men. Yet something of them remained. In the faces, the art, the rhythm of the people who still called the Nile their home. Every river village in Sudan, every sunlit dune, every ancient ruin holds a whisper of that time. When African kings ruled with wisdom, when queens defied empires, and when a civilization dared to dream of eternity. Their story lived not only in books or stone, but in memory, carried by the descendants of Nubia, who still walk the same riverbanks, whose skin carries the same glow of the desert sun, whose hearts still beat with pride for the land their ancestors built. Even in modern Nubia, songs are sung of Amanirenas, of Pie, of Taharka, not as distant legends, but as living spirits. To the people who know, they are not gone. They are guardians of memory, eternal rulers of a timeless land. Whispers in the wind. When the wind moves across the pyramids of Meroe, it doesn't just stir the sand, it stirs the past. You can almost hear the clang of metal from Kushite forges, the cries of traders in bustling markets, the chants of priests before towering statues of Amun. The Nile, flowing as it has for millennia, carries those sounds, faint but real, down to the sea. It carries the breath of Kush itself, and sometimes, when the night is quiet and the desert sky burns with 1,000 stars, it feels as if the land is speaking again. Not in words, but in feeling, in a sense of awe that stretches across ages. This is the magic of Kush. It was never just a kingdom. It was a spirit, a pulse, a living reminder that Africa's greatness runs deeper than the world ever knew. Few travelers reach the pyramids of Meroe today. They stand far from crowded cities, alone, quiet, and solemn beneath the open sky. But for those who do, the sight is breathtaking. Dozens of pointed pyramids rise from the sand, their walls etched with ancient carvings, their shadows stretching like fingers across the golden dunes. Some are crumbling, some half buried, yet together they form a landscape unlike any other on earth. They are smaller than those of Giza, yes, but somehow more intimate, more human. Each stone feels placed not for glory, but for remembrance. Each pyramid tells a story of a king who ruled justly, of a queen who commanded armies, of a people who believed that death was not an end, but a journey to the stars. And perhaps that is why they built their tombs so narrow and tall, to rise toward the heavens, to meet the gods face to face. These are not ruins, they are promises, promises made to the universe that the spirit of Kush would never fade. The light lives on the sands have covered cities. The years have swallowed names, but still, the light of Nubia shines. It shines in the strength of those who call Sudan home today. It glows in the eyes of young historians, archaeologists, and dreamers who uncover fragments of this forgotten world, who brush away sand not just to find bones or pottery, but to restore pride. Every artifact unearthed is not just history, it's a heartbeat, a pulse from the ancient world that still echoes in ours. And when you stand before those pyramids, under the same moon that once shone upon the queens of Kush, you begin to understand. Some stories are not meant to end. They are meant to be rediscovered, again and again, each time with greater wonder. The legacy of Nubia and Kush is not gone. It simply sleeps beneath the stars, waiting for those who remember to awaken it. And as dawn begins to break over the horizon, the first light of morning brushes against the ancient stones. The pyramids of Kush, silent for millennia, glow once more, their tips painted gold by the rising sun. It's as if the land itself is remembering, for in every sunrise there is rebirth. And in every whisper of wind across the desert, there is memory. The story of Kush is not just the tale of kings and queens long gone. It's the story of endurance, of pride, and of the unbreakable spirit of a people who refused to fade. From the banks of the Nile to the heart of the Sahara, their legacy still breathes. You can feel it in the rhythm of Nubian music, in the patterns of African art, in the grace and strength of those who carry their heritage today. Because the spirit of Kush was never meant to vanish, it was meant to travel through time, to remind the world that greatness has many homes and that civilization did not bloom in one valley alone, but across continents, across souls. The queens of Kush still watch from the stars. Amani Reinas, Amani Shaketo, Shanak Dakete, their crowns gleaming in the constellations, their names carried on the desert winds. The kings still stand tall in memory. Pie, Taharka, Alara, guardians of a golden age when the Nile belonged to them. And the pyramids, those sacred peaks of stone, still keep their silent vigil, their purpose unchanged. They do not speak, yet they tell us everything we need to know. They tell us that time can weather the walls, but it cannot erase the dream. That empires may fall, but their light can still warm the world thousands of years later. Because Kush was never just a kingdom. It was a flame that burned in the heart of Africa, a flame that defied the desert, and a flame that still flickers in every story told tonight. So, as you close your eyes and let the ancient winds carry you across the dunes of memory, remember this. History is not a single voice, it is a chorus, and among its voices, the people of Nubia and Kush sing the loudest. They sing of strength, of beauty, of a time when the world's center of light stood on African soil. Their story does not end in silence. It continues with every heartbeat that remembers them. So sleep now beneath the same stars that once guided their kings. Dream of the Nile, of temples carved in gold, of queens crowned under moonlight, and know that somewhere, deep in the desert's heart, the kingdom of Kush still breathes. Eternal, unbroken, its light forever alive in the sands of time.